Okay, now we have our motifs painted in the center of our square, and we're going to cut it apart and rearrange it. So to cut the square, and again, it's really important to make this as precise a cut as you can. There are two things that are really important here. One is having a square, and the other is going to come up in just a second here when we divide this square up into fourths. So you remember we put a dot on the center of each side. And this would be a really good time to check and make sure that those things actually are in the center, but I guess I don't really want to disrupt the video to do that. I'll just have faith here, which may not turn out to be such a good idea. Now what I'm going to do is going to cut from here to here and from here to here, but I don't need to cut a straight line. And what is really helpful is to cut so that you avoid cutting through as many of these motifs as you can. So like I would cut around that, come through here probably. I could go around this, but I think it's okay to just come right through there. And then I come around and come straight into that edge. And then coming the other way, I'll probably veer off to miss going through those grasses and come around and probably come this way. So let me just reiterate that the point is to make sure we start in the center, cut through to connect to the opposite center, and avoid as many of the motifs as we can without making, just a crazy impossible cut to make. And I'm going to use my knife rather than, I think I'm going to use my knife. Let me test this out and see how easy this is. Yeah, that should work fine. I have a new sharp blade here, and I'm cutting on the back of a drawing pad. Now, once again, the important thing is to start right in the center there. And return to the center. Okay. And it's important here to pick up exactly where you left off. So this is a little different than what I had marked. So I'm putting it back on here. I'm going to mark cut there. Okay. And come straight into that dot. Okay, now we'll rearrange it here. So this is the way it was. Now what we're going to do is switch opposite corners. So this and this are going to switch. This and this are going to switch. And then we're going to reassemble our pieces. So I'm going to flip it over. And tape those edges together on the back. And I like to fold the end of the tape so I can get it off easily again. So you can see it's not matching up really precisely, like I wish it would. And this is where the low-tech way departs from the high-tech way, because when you're using Adobe Illustrator, of course, the program is going to do whatever it's going to do absolutely perfectly without anybody having to cut and reattach and so on. So, you know, it's not going to be perfect, but it's still fun. And you still get some nice results. Okay, it's taped together. Now what we're going to do is fill in the blank space with our motifs. So I will stop talking once again and just paint, and then we'll come back and see where we are. Okay. Go with our motifs, and I'm starting out right away putting one in that crosses one of those seams. And it's important to do that. Likewise, it's important not to put any motifs crossing the outer or touching the outer boundary. So a fern, like we've done many times before, going right boldly across that seam. And then another one. And I really am happy and in a way surprised that when I paint over the seam, the paint doesn't bleed along the edges of the paper, and I'm very grateful for that. That is wonderful. It would be a real problem if it did bleed along that seam, but it doesn't. So now we've got two motifs crossing those boundaries, and I'm going to put a flower in right in the corner there. Not quite in the center of our new reassembled piece, but close to it. And as I'm placing motifs here, I'm doing it just like I have in the first half, just assessing, looking at what I have, thinking about what I want where, painting something, reassessing, just going through that cycle of do something, assess it, decide what to do next, do it, etc. And some pretty dark leaves in contrast to some of the lighter ones. And now another contrast, I've got a blue flower, but it's a type of flower that I painted in pink before. It's one of those round petal flowers, but just the bud. Here's a berry going across those seam lines again. Quite a lot of paint there, still not bleeding along that seam. So don't be shy about painting across the seam. Branch of berries. Starting with the liner brush and then moving to the small round brush to paint the berries themselves. And switching colors as I go, somewhat anyway. Some leaves there where the side branches meet a main branch. Assessing. So I've got one part pretty full, but several other parts still need work. Let's put a compound leaf here. Once again, across the seam, I'm using the angled brush. Another one. Darknesses of the greens and different mixtures of the various greens, and that gives me good visual interest in the piece. There we have the calyx for the little blue bud. And I think it'd be nice to have another one this time close to that edge but not touching it. Strengthening that blue at the edge of the flower. To take more out. Starting to look good. Mix of motifs in here, nice coverage. Now I'm adding some more paint to the outer edge of this round petal leaf, and I think that's going to end up making it maybe the dominant motif in this design. We'll see. Let's take a stem across that seam, fill that area in with the stem and a couple leaves. Almost done here. I think I lost some video. I was having trouble with my phone, but so we're going to lose this pretty soon, but you get the idea. So I'm done painting the inside of the piece once I rearranged the quarters of it. And what I'm going to do next, first of all, I'm going to go and dry it, so I'm not going to make any more smears than I already have. And then I'm going to reassemble it the way it originally was and see if there's anything I want to add. Okay, be right back. So we've created our, I guess you could call it our master block for our repeat pattern. And this piece, remember we started with the square and worked in the center, cut it apart, put it back together, worked in the then center, took it back apart and put it back together in the original square. And you can possibly see the tape on the back. So this is what we work with to make the repeat. And this is a low-tech way and not that accurate a way either. But it is doable without a bunch of technology. So the lowest low-tech way simply uses a photocopier. So I began by making several copies of this on my copier, and I reduced it in size. And then I reduced it, I think, about 60%. You have to fool around with, or you have to do a little bit of thinking about what size you want. But in any case, I made 9 copies, and I cut them all out because each little piece came out on a piece of paper of its own, and then taped them together. And this is what I got. Now you can see that there are some places where it's not aligning really well. And that's the nature of the low-tech way. But still, overall, it has a nice feel to it. And I think it's quite usable for something like elements or the background of a collage. So what I would do at this point, so I cut 9 pieces, taped them together. What I would do at this point would be to take a regular sheet of paper and just use it to draw some lines, to cut this piece into closer to an 8.5 by 11 so that I could put it in the copier again and copy the sheet, and it wouldn't be flopping around. I wouldn't have tape on the back. It would just be simply a one piece of paper that is copied. And then you can use that in whatever way you want. Now, if you're going to go over it with any kind of water-based medium or paint, and that would include acrylic and also the probably most of the adhesives that you would use, like matte medium in a collage. What you have to do is seal this ink unless you take your original piece to a copy center and do copies on a laser printer, because I think the laser printer inks are not water soluble. But if you print on an inkjet, water will, I'll show you. Water can dissolve it. Well, that did pretty good. That surprised me. In any case, I have had problems with water smudging the ink, and if you want to make sure that doesn't happen, take a fixative like Krylon Workable Fixative, which is a spray, and spray it, let it dry, and then it's waterproof. So super low tech. You could probably do better than I did here, but still this would be usable. And then the next way up, if you happen to have Photoshop Elements or Photoshop, you can take your original piece and scan it in, take it into Photoshop, reduce it to the size you want, create a canvas that's the size of a piece of paper, and just start laying copies of this onto it. And that's what I did for this. And then just saved it as a JPEG and then printed it out. Again, if I were going to use this in a collage, I would seal it with Krylon Workable Fixative. And I think it's kind of pretty, and it was fun to do. And I guess I don't really have much more to say than that. Sometimes I enjoy doing something a little different. And in this case, working with watercolor and working with stroke work was a little different than what I usually do. But I have done this type of work in backgrounds of paintings or collages. And the last thing I want to do is go over with you again that we did use a piece of our original stroke work to create this sweet little card. And then I also really liked the rose that we did, and I cut it out in the shape of a little tag and punched a hole. And here I have a gift tag, or something I can use. You could make bookmarks or whatever out of these little things. So I hope you enjoyed the project, creating stroke work, leaves and flowers. And from that, our little bonus items that we got. And finally, the master block for the repeat pattern. So that's it for motifs and repeats. I hope you had fun. I hope you found something useful for you, and enjoy. Thank you. Bye-bye.